So, a fresh new week has arrived, and here on this channel, that means one thing and one thing only. Every week I post an episode of this series we do called Your Take Not Mine, where I turn to you, the viewers, to give me your hottest NBA takes of the week, and based on what's going on at the time, I'll choose my favorite submissions and discuss them in a video. This week, a lot has actually gone down, as training camp is starting to ramp up, so the season's right around the corner, and we saw a big blockbuster trade go down, so we definitely have plenty to discuss. In order to submit your takes, I make a community post on either the day of or the day before the video, similar to the one that you see on your screen now, and if you want a chance to be featured in a future episode, definitely be sure to stay on the lookout for that. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but it also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Hezi, and he says that the Timberwolves got robbed in the trade that just saw them trade away Karl Anthony Towns to the New York Knicks in exchange for Julius Randle, Donte DiVincenzo, and a first-round pick, saying that Towns will do more for the Knicks than Julius Randle will do for the Timberwolves. Alright, so unless you've been living under a rock lately, you all already know about this deal that became the biggest piece of basketball news of the month, because right before training camp, the Knicks kept their active summer going by finding their answer at the center position. After they lost Isaiah Hartenstein in free agency, they then got news that Mitchell Robinson's health may take a little while longer than expected to fully recover, so that was definitely a position of weakness for them heading into the season, and now they've got an all-star caliber guy who will reliably keep the floor spaced on the offensive end and open things up even more for Jalen Brunson and his elite creation skills. There is definitely a lot to like about Karl Anthony Towns' fit on the Knicks, offensively at least, because he reliably scores over 20 points per game every year, knocking down 42% of his threes, and he's also going to be able to go back to being a full-time center again after spending the last 2 years playing power forward alongside Rudy Gobert. The reason why I disagree with the idea that the Wolves got quote-unquote robbed in this trade though, is because the Timberwolves on paper definitely got more value from this deal. Everyone seems to only be looking at this trade from the perspective of it being a swap of Towns for Julius Randle, and are completely ignoring how nice it is to also receive Donte DiVincenzo and a first-round pick on top of Randle are, when Towns really isn't that much better than Randle just 1 versus 1. Randle had one of the worst reputations in the NBA amongst all-star caliber guys because he has a pretty bad track record in the playoffs. There's no two ways about it, but neither does Towns. In the playoffs last year, the Wolves got outscored by 10 points per 100 possessions with Karl Anthony Towns on the court and Rudy Gobert on the bench. Meanwhile, when Rudy Gobert was on the court without Towns on the court, the Wolves outscored their opponents by 15 points per 100 possessions. And I'm sorry, but that kind of data cannot be ignored when discussing which of the two big men are a better fit for what the team needs. The two-center pairing was never going to work long-term, and Towns was the clear odd man out, so bringing in Randle, who is an all-NBA caliber player who is also a natural power forward to slide into the lineup, while also strengthening their depth even further with Donte DiVincenzo's sharpshooting off the bench, makes this much more of a win-win than I'm seeing people admit. Randle can also hit free agency next summer if he turns down his player option, so the team isn't even tied to keeping him long-term if they don't want to be, and that kind of flexibility helps preserve their long-term outlook as Anthony Edwards continues to improve over time as well. The Knicks were in need of an offensive boost during last year's playoffs, and they got it with Towns, but they did it by sacrificing a bit on defense, where Towns has struggled his entire career, and in the Eastern Conference, when you have to go through big men like Joel Embiid and Giannis Antetokounmpo, being forced to trust Karl Anthony Towns in those matchups isn't that ideal. The next take we'll be discussing today comes to us from fellow YouTuber Alvini Linguini actually, and he says that if the Hornets can stay fully healthy this season, he thinks they can be a breakout playoff team in the East this year, similar to what the Orlando Magic did last season. The Hornets have been rebuilding for a few years now, and ideally this is about the time when a team going through that phase should start to think about taking the next steps forward towards contention, but are they realistically equipped to do so? When LaMelo LaMelo Ball was first drafted, the Hornets actually made the play-in tournament in both his rookie season and his second season, and LaMelo was even an all-star in his second season. But as Alvini stated, struggles with injuries have really hampered these last 2 seasons, and now it feels like people forget that LaMelo Ball can actually lead a team winning basketball games on the court, and at full strength with the right pieces, he can be dangerous with his playmaking. The real issue the last 2 seasons has been that on top of all the injuries that they've endured, they also just didn't have that much talent and were more so fully embracing that rebuilding timeline. One thing I will say that gives me hope for a potential breakout is that after making a few trades last year, there was a month where they were actually one of the top-ranked defenses in the NBA, with Brandon Miller really stepping up and Grant Williams breathing new life into his season after leaving Dallas. What I think their chances fully hinge on is the health of Mark Williams at center, though, who was a lottery pick back in 2022 but has struggled with a lot of injuries of his own. Last season he was only healthy for 19 games, but in those games, the Hornets were a whopping 11.3 points better per 100 possessions with him on the court. He was a walking double-double, and his movement in the paint protecting the rim was a breath of fresh air to their defense, which was overall pretty poor. They need to improve on the defensive end to really take a leap, and Williams may be the key to doing that consistently. I don't think this roster is necessarily talented enough to make the playoffs this season, but I do believe they could end up in the play-in tournament, giving themselves a chance to play their way into that spot. And realistically, that would be a strong step in the right direction for this core. And finally, the last take we'll be discussing today comes to us from Tyler, and he says that the Indiana Pacers will fall into the play-in tournament this year. Last season was a big breakout year for the Pacers as well, as they were the 6th seed but made it all the way to the conference finals, and after a run like that, many are predicting them to carry that momentum forward. The thing about the NBA though is that things can change rapidly, and if you get too complacent, you oftentimes get past year to year. Thinking back to 2021 when the Atlanta Hawks made a surprise run to the conference finals, many fans expected that to catapult the Hawks to the top of the conference, but since then, they haven't won a single playoff series, which just goes to show my point here. The Indiana Pacers did retain Pascal Siakam, TJ McConnell, and Obi Toppin in free agency this summer, which is a win on paper, but they're returning virtually the same exact team as they had last year, and a lot of teams around them improved a ton. The 76ers improved top to bottom, the Orlando Magic improved while also expecting another leap from budding star Paolo Banchero, and teams like the Celtics, Bucks, Cavaliers, and Knicks all just have better rosters, so it really wouldn't surprise me to see Indiana finish 7th or 8th place in the standings. They exploded out of the gate offensively last season, then came back down to earth in the second half of the year, and if they can't replicate a top 2 finish in the league offensively like they did last season, then their defensive issues are much bigger as a cause for concern as a group that ranked 24th on defense last year. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about the takes discussed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.